TechRage IT co-founder Matt Rose joins us this week to discuss new AI integration in ConnectWise, Kaseya's economic outlook, and cyber liability. Plus, a special guest interview with Canalys chief analyst for global channels Jay McBain and economic trends and its impact to the channel. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 256, Florida Man. Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly episode number 256. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine show for folks out there like you. And you know, if you've listened before, you probably know who you are. But if this is your first time on the show and you woke up with severe amnesia and have no idea who you are, but you saw this podcast in your playlist, I will tell you who you are. You are a VAR, you're an MSP, you're an IT integrator, you're a system builder, you're maybe a CIO. I'm sure we have a few of those out there that kind of follow us. You might be well, one of those things. The general gist is that if you do technology solutions and integrations and consulting with other businesses, you are in the right place. If you woke up this morning and you found a jungle outfit and a name tag to your local zoo, you may not be in the right place, but you might be looking for a career change, and we welcome you one and all as well. Joining me this week and most weeks is the man of the hour here, the guy who keeps things running on time, has all these great insights to tell you, and is also a man with a keen sense of fashion, executive editor Rich Freeman.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. Yeah, you know, you can't go wrong with basic black.
You can't go wrong with black. You also can't go wrong with sport coats and jeans. I think like you revolutionized channel fashion with your particular look that you don when you're out gallivanting across the globe. How did you come up with that combination? Were you just like, oh crap, I forgot my nice suit pants at home, so I'm just gonna like throw jeans on and then wear the rest of it?
You know, basically, it's like a packing thing with me. I want to be comfortable on a plane. I don't want to pack my sport coat because it always comes out a mess or whatever. So I wear a t-shirt and jeans. I put the sport coat on over that, and that's how I transport the sport coat to where I'm going. And it turns out to be kind of a practical dressing choice, basically, because you can actually get away. If I show up for some of the things I do in a t-shirt and jeans, I'm underdressed. Gosh, you know, you put a sport coat on top of the t-shirt, and suddenly I'm business casual. At least that seems to be the case.
It's like when you go to the restaurant and you're wearing like, you know, cut off sleeves and, you know, ripped up pants, and they give you the little tie, you know, like the little clip-on tie, and you just nip it to your t-shirt, and there you go. Now you're doing fancy dress for a restaurant. So your sport coat's like your little clip-on tie.
Exactly. It's camouflage for being casually dressed.
And so when was the last time you actually wore a tie?
Oh gosh, yeah, I was just thinking about that not long ago. Years. I think a friend of mine got married a few years back. That's probably the last time I put a tie on, I think.
I'm gonna get to our guest in a second, because I gotta ask him this, but like, do people really wear ties anymore? It seems like business dress has kind of, it used to, everybody has to wear fancy suits, and you know, you had to do the whole fancy thing, but it seems like that is very rare these days. Am I reading the business climate right, Rich? You're out at all these things. What are people wearing?
Well, you almost never see ties. In fact, actually, you almost never see sport coats. It's a lot of golf shirts and khakis, and you know, that's what people will attend at those events, or will wear at those events when attending. I co-host another podcast for ChannelPro, the ChannelPro 5-minute roundup with Eric Simpson, who is an MSP consultant. He will wear a tie sometimes. I know, but he's one of the few people I know who does that with any regularity.
I gotta bring our guest in on this. I gotta find out what his sense of fashion is. So let me introduce him real quick. Our guest has worn many hats in the IT field, from consultant to virtual chief information officer, has worked for small to mid-sized businesses to global 2,000 companies. He's currently the co-founder and director of technology solutions at TechRage IT, with more than 20 years of experience in the business. He's also author of the book Kiss TechRage IT. Please welcome, excited to have him on the show, the one, the only, the Matt Rose. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So when was the last time you wore a tie?
There was a time with the business where I used to do the suit and tie to go to an appointment for a prospect, and then that felt overdressed, and then we went to polos, and now I'm kind of in the middle. I actually do the sport coat and jeans, you know, for a lot of stuff. So I'm kind of with Rich on that. I don't really put the black on black though. You know, or just, you know, button downs work too. So,
You know, it's funny. I was kind of bringing this up just kind of just to have something funny to talk about. But you know what you're saying though is that it's actually important. You don't want to go to a client way overdressed because that could actually kind of hurt you from starting up a relationship. So, kind of figuring out what the current trends are in fashion and business seems kind of like an important thing.
yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think it also depends who you're going to. Like, if you're going to like a big, lawyer's office where everyone's in a suit, it's probably fine. But if you're going to, we have some clients that are, manufacturing, and everyone in there is just, they're trying to get work done. I'm not going to go looking at, a suit and tie. I'm going to look like I'm trying to be above them or something. So you want to dress to the situation the best you can.
Well, I guess if you do accidentally overdress and wear a tie, you could just be like, "Oh, well, I'm going to a wedding after this," because then that's like the universal like phrase of forgiveness, So, Matt, we're going to learn a little bit more about you in a minute, but Rich, I got to turn back attention to some top of the episode stuff that we got to talk about, and one of those is events. We got some events coming up. Tell us what's coming up in the near future.
I think we are about 3 weeks away, if I'm not mistaken, from ChannelPro's next, our second SMB Forum event of 2023. This one's going to be in the Washington, D.C. area near Dulles Airport, which is quite convenient to most of the northeastern United States. So we hope to see a whole bunch of you out there. We're going to be doing our session on building a truly cloud-first managed services practice. We've got a great session that we are calling the MSP Automation Bake-Off. We've got 3 RMM PSA tool experts on stage competing to offer you the best trick that you can use to get more automation, more productivity out of the tools that you're already paying for and using. We have our Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game show, and I know there are a lot of people in our audience right now who want to get to $1 million and beyond. We have pulled together all sorts of great advice for you about how to do that. We are presenting it in the form of a game show. We did that at our last SMB Forum event in Dallas. It was a smash hit with the audience. So that and much more, people, what you want to do is go to events.channelpronetwork.com and look for information about our Washington, D.C. area event. Plenty of time still to register, and we hope to see you there.
And unlike Dallas, Texas, where if you get any form of frozen consolidation or snow of any kind, where the world shuts down, if there is snow in DC around that time, they know how to clear the roads. So you can absolutely get to this one. So if you're anywhere in the northeast, come. We'll make it easy. You can check out all of our events, because if you're not maybe in the northeast region, but you're in Southern California, for example, we've got 7 more shows coming out this year, all over the country. Go to channelproforum.com/2023. I'll put a QR code up for those who are watching on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe, hit the bell, hit all the thumbs up and all those things. But go there. That'll help you get to all the registration forms. Go sign up. You're not going to miss it. It's a great show. The Dallas, despite some issues with weather, it was a smash hit for everyone who was there. It was really great. Make sure you come and join us this year. We want to see you. We want to shake your hand, and we want to help you and your business grow and be more successful. So Matt, great to have you on the show. I know this is your first time with us here on ChannelPro Weekly, so our audience probably isn't overly familiar with you. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and a little bit more about your business, TechRage IT?
Sure. So TechRage IT is located in the Central Florida or Orlando area, for those who don't know Florida geography. And we've been in business for about 8 years now. So we're one of the younger kind of MSPs in the world. We have a lot of people around here that have been in business since the 90s and early 2000s. Started out as consulting, because as you mentioned earlier in my bio, I started in kind of an enterprise IT world in the early 2000s in New York City, and decided to get into a consulting kind of piece with some work, and then that kind of morphed into me finding the MSP world, finding the Reddit and finding all these different places, and being and liking that idea better. So we morphed the business from at one point being 90% consulting dollars and really just me, to now we're a negligible amount of consulting that isn't already with our partner, or our full managed contracts. And we've been lucky enough to grow year over year. I think we're 7 or 8 employees right now. My partner in the business does all of the HR and the accounting, and this I do the fun stuff. I do sales and technical, and she has to do everything else. So I feel like I have the good job there. Just really try to, we're an MSP that we try to, we don't want to say that we're cutting edge in the sense that we will switch our technology at a moment's notice, like, oh, new antivirus. But we want to know what's going on in the market. We want to, we don't want to just rest on our laurels and be like, well, we've always done it that way. There's all the sayings about like that's the kind of saying that kind of kills you. And so we're always just kind of looking to be better, make our internal better, making our customers better, and seem to have gotten a good following. And I think it's because we think a little differently than a lot of MSPs out there.
And so you certainly think differently in terms of naming conventions too. How did you come up with Tech Rage? I see, because I saw the logo. It's like a guy smash.
Yes.
Is that like inspired from Office Space when they're hitting a printer?
So it's a fun story. So we actually, our legal name is actually Intersection Technology Solutions. And that was because when we started the business, I don't know, it was like, I'm at an intersection in my life. And it was kind of to a point where I took this consulting job from where I was at a full-time kind of an IT director job. And I felt like I was in an intersection of my life kind of thing, very, very deep. And then, and it was a name. I didn't want to be Rose Technology Consultant. I've never liked that. No offense to all the people that might be listening to this with their name and their title. And then that just was too long to say. People didn't know what you did. Oh, what technology do you use to have solutions for? They didn't know. They thought we did web development, anything, whatever. And a business, consultant at one point kind of said you should change your name. And a few years prior, my partner was going to a networking event locally, and they were doing that whole thing where you would have to like kind of stand up for 30 seconds and say, hi, I'm so and so, and this is what our business does. She was stressed beyond belief about it, and she thought of road rage and thought tech rage, and said, like, we prevent tech rage, said the statement. And so she came up with a little blurb. It got laughs. Every networking event we went to, it got a laugh just by saying, at the time we were Intersection Technology Solutions, which it's hard to say now, and we prevent tech rage, and that part would just get people laughing. And so we just decided to change to Tech Rage IT, change the colors, get the little logo, and it took off. And we realized maybe we would alleviate, there may be some part of the market that just thought it was angry and whatever, but how many times we get calls from prospects or a joke at a networking event, or once in a while, like we'll get a ticket from a customer who really does love us, and they're like, hey, this is working. I'm having tech rage, guys, help me. And it's turned into and we actually trademarked it. So for anyone listening, don't try to use tech rage. I'll come after you. So it just turned into a really good marketing name, and we've been running with it ever since.
So don't use that. It's trademarked, because a tech rage will send their lawyer rage after you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we have lawyer rage too.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about your journey, because every MSP owner who kind of goes on this, they have a path, and I know you had a path through mid-size and small businesses. What were some of the businesses that you worked for, and what kind of ultimately brought you to that intersection where you decided, I want to do this?
Yeah, so it's weird. I say that there's a lot of businesses, and I'm sure a lot of listeners, whatever, that started their business when they were 20, 25 years old, and maybe their first job, maybe lucky enough that they just started their business because of whatever. I, got out of college, was living in the New York, living in the New York area, living in New York City, and I just worked regular IT, junior level admin, senior network admin, systems admin. At my first real job was at a pharmaceutical company. The hint behind there is it's the company that Martha Stewart got arrested for selling stock in. It's on my LinkedIn. It's not like it's after that. I got in afterwards. So, but I worked there for a while. I worked at a real estate investment trust, also in New York City. And around that time, just, with we was going to get married. We're going to move down to Florida. And then I got into government contracting down here with one of the largest well, I don't even know if they've all changed names and whatever now. So I've had all this crazy experience. Then I went to a smaller government contractor, which turned into a venture capital. So I kind of came into this place of having, 500 to 1,000 person companies to 80,000 person companies I was at, to a couple hundred person. And then the owner would just literally, instead of kind of just having a new product, he'd start a new company. And so I was the IT director. And so I started realizing, I realized after the fact I was being an MSP without realizing it, because we'd have to set up, all right, we need to get this new domain name, this email, when 365 was like in its infancy. So all the fun tools weren't there, and, shipping laptops to part of the nation. So this is like in 2012 to 2013. And that was when I had this, intersection where I got an opportunity to consult with somebody I'd known since the mid 2000s who had helped me when I was at those larger companies. He was one of the people that would come and help install the new, Blade servers at the time were the the crazy thing. And he had started consulting business, needed some help, and it just kind of went from there. And I enjoyed that. I was traveling to New York once a month. Had a young family, but I had like one contract. It was good money, but it was one contract, and it was like, okay, if something happens there, I'm kind of screwed. So that was when just kind of found some people in the MSP world, found some friends that I'm still friends with that helped me understand it. And again, started kind of moving from consulting into managed services. And I've always kind of said that I think that one differentiator that helped us early on is, again, those people who, good for them, that 20, 25 years old, starting their own IT company, but they don't really have any other real world experience. I came into this with a lot of really, again, Fortune 2000, real in-office experience, understanding a lot of this stuff. I was in my 30s when we started the company, but I was able to, I think I understood enterprise level. And if you understand enterprise level IT, I think it's a little easier to understand this. Like, it's almost easy when like 20, 30 person company is like complaining about something like, is that it? Sometimes it's like, I got to fix this for 20 people, not 2000. I can, we can probably do that. And it's been a good journey. It's been a good journey ever since.
Very cool. That is a very interesting story, and I thank you for sharing that. And I'm excited to kind of get some of that insight that you have from like working at the big companies and also working as an MSP with the smaller companies on some of the stories that we're going to talk about, because we've got a great show ahead. Lots of great things to talk about. We're going to be talking about ConnectWise. We're going to be talking about Kaseya. We're going to be talking about cyber liability. Definitely a hot topic right now. We got a really cool interview coming up. Jay McBain, the chief analyst for global channels at Canalys, is going to join us. Always a pleasure when Jay is on. He's always has some amazing things to say. So it's gonna be a wild ride, folks. Strap on in. Rich, I think we got a couple stories that kind of go together. They're ConnectWise stories. So I'm seeing this. If I hear the word Chat GPT again, it's gonna be too soon. It's like everything I read, everything I'm hearing, everyone's talking about this stuff. Rich, what's going on at ConnectWise?
And the fact that ChatGPT is maybe a touch overexposed might play into the fact that this didn't get as much attention actually out there as I kind of expected it to. That that and the fact that the news broke last Friday. Friday is maybe not a great day to get the attention of the media, but the news basically is that ConnectWise has, or is right on the verge of introducing, they have announced a new tool, a new addition to their ConnectWise Automate and ConnectWise RMM products that is designed to automate scripting, and it is based on ChatGPT. And so the idea that this is not aimed at somebody who knows nothing about scripting, but if you know some about PowerShell, but it takes you some time to write scripts, or you have lots of scripts to write, wouldn't it be great if you could go into your RMM system, prompt ChatGPT essentially, here, I need a script in PowerShell that does X, Y, and Z, and get most of the way there in a few seconds in an automated kind of way. So this, it's not going to spit out a fully baked, ready to use immediately script. According to ConnectWise, what it produces for you will be 80 to 95% of the way there. You're going to have to kind of clean it up, round it out a little bit. You're going to want to test it, obviously, before you put it into production. But if you are used to spending 4 hours to produce a PowerShell script, maybe you can do it now in an hour or less, because a lot of that, the basic stuff was just done for you by an AI engine. And in this particular case, yep, it is ChatGPT, OpenAI's headline-grabbing artificial intelligence engine. Specifically, ConnectWise is using Microsoft's implementation of that. So there's the Microsoft Azure OpenAI service that came out in January, and that's specifically what they're kind of plugging into right now. What is interesting and significant about this is, so first of all, and these kinds of claims are a little difficult to verify, but according to ConnectWise, they are the first managed services suite maker to build an AI-based process or AI-based process automation into an RMM tool. So there are robotic process automation solutions out there from other companies, including Pia, which is a startup a lot of folks may have heard of, Roost, MSP Bots. There are a lot of companies kind of doing this kind of automated managed services work. ConnectWise says this is the first time somebody has built an AI-based robotic process automation tool into an RMM system. And they also say they're the first software vendor in the managed services space to release an OpenAI integration of any kind. So that in and of itself is kind of interesting and significant. But what this exposed, this is basically the tip of a much, much larger iceberg. As it happens, ConnectWise already had this initiative in place to build a lot of AI into its products going forward. And one of the things they wanted to do was automate scripting. And then last November 30th, OpenAI announces ChatGPT to the world. And the ConnectWise folks realized, well, this actually might work better than what we were working on before, and that's how ChatGPT ends up built into this. But they're developing their own engines into house. They're researching Google and so on, and they've got big plans. They didn't want to get into details with me, examples of forthcoming automations around AI that they're going to be doing. But over the next few months, you're going to see more announcements like this, apparently, because they're really going to be looking to turn AI and the productivity it enables and the automation it enables into a competitive advantage for them down the road.
So, Matt, are you playing around with AI? Are you using ChatGPT? You're writing novels with AI? What are you doing?
Yeah, I think I started with ChatGPT the way most of us, kind of nerds did. Like I think you had to write songs about people, like, cause you say you put your friend's name in about something, and just being silly. I actually one of my buddies actually put something in there and had it say something about security, but in the voice of Mr. Mackey from South Park, and it actually like wrote it as Mr. Mackey with an MK. So it's pretty intelligent. And we had fiddled around with the whole PowerShell thing early on, and what Rich said is right. You can't take these things and say they're ready for prime time, but we've been using it. We've had it like kind of, even if we're trying to write a new job description or something of that nature, sometimes it's like, write me a job description for this with an emphasis somewhere, and it gives you it gives you a little cheat code. All you have to do is edit it. Policies or something. You're trying to make a new policy. The other day I was trying to make a new travel policy, and I was kind of like, let's see. And I don't know, it spit something out that now I can kind of like edit here and there, and I don't have to Google and wonder what weird place put their travel policy online that, is all. So it's pretty incredible. To see the ConnectWise is implemented. I think they're right that they're the first RMM vendor and whatnot. I do know because we work with Roost, and they've actually, I don't know if it's fully prime time, but they've had something for a week or two now that it integrates into it. But I think that they're still getting it. But I think that still means ConnectWise with the first RMM integrated probably works. But I think everyone's going to kind of go this way, and I think it makes sense. The Roost one isn't so much for PowerShell; it's more for like it'll look at a ticket and put in the ticket. Here's some stuff that might help you solve this. So the technicians, it'll basically say like, if this person's getting this error in Outlook, it'll put in the ticket, like, here's the things you can try. And it's just kind of an interesting, so there's a million different ways you can do it. It's scary at times, but it's fantastic, I think it's really is the way of the future.
It seems like all of the content of the world going forward will be created by this thing, and then just slightly edited by human beings is how it's going to go. It is kind of scary. So Rich, they're doing a lot of other stuff around AI. Any other things to kind of highlight that is of interest?
Well, I asked, but they're not willing to disclose that yet. It's all kind of top secret. But I can say, this first AI application is for techs, and they've got more for techs coming. But they're thinking around different persona-based applications or uses for AI, and so they have stuff coming for owners and service dispatchers and salespeople maybe, and so there's going to be a variety, a range of these AI enhanced features. They won't just go into the RMM tools. They definitely, this they did mention, is there are AI based features coming to ConnectWise PSA. I assume this is true of other ConnectWise products. So they've got a lot coming, and it doesn't sound like we're going to have to wait a long time to start seeing some of those examples.
Very, very interesting. Well, we will keep an eye on that, and I'm sure we're going to see lots more ChatGPT in our future as it gets rolled into everything, because it looks like that's what's happening, and we'll have to deal with the ramifications of all this AI, which I also think we have no idea what the ramifications are going to be. Now, Matt, you touched on scary. What do you think some of the ramifications are going to be?
So I saw something. This was probably mid-January. There's something on LinkedIn, some, scholar, somebody smarter than me was talking at a conference and saying how they had it write like a like a final paper on something, and it was, you couldn't tell the difference. And so I have young kids. I have a 9 and a 5-year-old, and I'm like, are they ever going to know how to write? You talk about plagiarism in the old days, and it's pretty obvious because you're writing the same words, and you can ask ChatGPT the same thing, and it'll write it slightly different. And so I'm scared for kind of the youth in a way of like, are they going to learn anything? So I'm kind of scared long term because I think the other stuff is, it's all information available. We'll see how it kind of changes over time, but I think it's more scary for like the youth and for brain power, and hoping that, some of the things we all had to learn growing up still somehow are valid.
It's interesting because you talk. Sorry, Rich, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I just kind of pulled up something that I find scary about ChatGPT in a slightly different way. So this is something that happened over the holiday. Over the holidays, I was exchanging emails with Ole Thordarson, who's an MSP in Southern California, and he's been a co-host on this, or guest host on this program a few times, most recently last October. And he, in this email thread at one point, sent along like snapshots, screen grabs of the following. So here is his prompt to ChatGPT. Write me a joke about Rich Freeman of ChannelPro building a computer network. And the response was, sure, here's a joke about Rich Freeman building a computer network. Why was Rich Freeman building a computer network in the desert? Because he heard it was a hot networking spot. Which is not hilarious, but it is a joke. And this thing, I'll give you one more though, because this is the one that freaks me out. Same prompt. Write me a joke about Rich Freeman of ChannelPro building a computer network. Answer. Why did Rich Freeman of ChannelPro build a computer network? Because he wanted to connect all his devices and be the free man of the network. And free man, like spelled like my name. Ole didn't ask for a pun, but he got one, and the computer, the AI knows what a pun is. It understood the connection between the name Freeman and the words free man, and it worked it into a joke. That's weird.
That is weird. That is pretty scary. It clearly didn't know a lot about you, because it looked, you could have, other than saying Rich Freeman of ChannelPro, it didn't really have much tie-in to you specifically. But I have to imagine if you're a celebrity, or if there's a lot of biographical information on somebody out there, it could probably spit out some highly accurate and personal types of jokes and those kinds of situations as well. So that is kind of scary. Now, man, I want to talk. You hit on something about like the youth, and this is not the first time technology has the opportunity to change youth, right? I mean, there was back in the day before calculators. Everybody had to learn how to do like long form math and do all of these different things, and then calculators and graphing calculators and scientific calculators kind of revolutionized that to the point where, like, a lot of times you don't need to know how to do the math. You just need to know how to apply the tool to do whatever concept you're working on. And I wonder if down the road that's what the youth are going to be taught. Like, you don't need to know how to structurally write a paper. You just need to know how to edit it, right?
It could be. And it's funny, as you're saying that, I realize it's one thing I actually tell people a lot. It's like, I don't necessarily look to hire, and this is no offense to any of my techs at work for me if they're listening, I don't look to hire the best and greatest tech who did God knows what at a network, or at their last, job, but they also need to be able to Google, like, because you get these sometimes you get someone that, hey, this is happening, and they need to find the error message, they need to find the keywords, because someone probably had the problem. So I guess you're right. Like, in that way, it's kind of like, I don't need somebody to be able to do everything and know everything about server 2019 or so. I need them to be able to find the answer. So it's an interesting point you say that. It maybe that is where we're going. And that's
identify a problem and leverage tools that exist to solve it, right?
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to have the tech that knows everything about everything in his head because he read a million books. He just needs to know how to write a search query, right? Yeah. And in this case, ask ChatGPT to do 90% of the work of writing a script to fix it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It is scary. It is weird. I got kids too, and it's like, what is their college experience gonna be like? Because I know what mine was like. Yeah. And I think theirs is going to be very, 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 very different. School is already very different from what it was when I went to school. So it is gonna be interesting. Anyway, we could talk about this all day. This is a very interesting topic, but we're gonna start going down into the weeds if we go any further. So, Rich, we've got one more story that we want to talk about, and that is Kaseya. Oh, this is kind of like going to lead into our interview, really, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about later with Jay McBain. But what Kaseya has their crystal ball out, and they got the little funny hat on. They're waving their hands over it. A cloud inside is forming. What is it showing them?
Well, it's showing them some interesting things about the economy and about the managed services landscape. I should say there isn't a lot of really hard news in this particular story that we're referring to here. Late last week, Kaseya reached out to me and other people in the media to announce that they were attaching new names to their conferences. And there is actually something of some significance in here, because when Kaseya bought Datto, announced last spring they were buying Datto, there were a lot of Datto partners who were worried that the DattoCon conference would just go away. And it was held last year, but I suspect there are still some people who are worried about the future of DattoCon. And the good news is there will still continue to be a DattoCon. Kaseya is going to be doing 4 big conferences a year. The Kaseya Connect Global, which is essentially the big partner event they were doing before buying Datto. The event that they are now calling Kaseya DattoCon instead of just DattoCon, but it'll be the same show, they emphasized with me. And then they're doing DattoCons in Europe and in Asia as well. So if you were concerned that there's no more DattoCon, or that it'll turn into a Kaseya event or turn into something you don't like, the message from Kaseya is not at all. But they sent this to me, and that isn't maybe earth-shattering news, but they did give me an opportunity to talk to Fred Vacola, their CEO, about that and other things, and I grabbed that opportunity. And one of the things we got into was just the market outlook, the view from his seat of the economy and the tech industry right now. And he said basically Kaseya is making all of its plans right now around the assumption that we're in for a quote-unquote really bad 24-month macroeconomic environment. So the next 2 years, they think, are not going to be slow or bad, but really bad. That said, he said it's going to be ugly out there, but it's going to be a lot less ugly for vendors like Kaseya who serve MSPs. And that's because it's going to be less ugly for the MSPs. He said, you're seeing all these layoffs in the tech industry, Salesforce, Microsoft, and so on. A lot of these companies, they first of all grew too rapidly. They overinvested. They, thought they were never going to see a recession again or whatever. And so they're kind of dialing some of those mistakes back. But they also sell heavily into enterprises, big businesses that are much more sort of advanced in terms of digital transformation and automation. SMBs less so. They've got a lot of ground to cover. And as we talked about a month or so ago, when we were discussing ChannelPro's tech preview story for 2023, a down economy can be a good time to be an MSP, because if you can go to your customers and say, I've got a way for you to be more productive and spend less and grow your business without growing the payroll, et cetera. People want to hear about that now. They need to get more efficient in a slower economy. So MSPs should be doing well. That means Kaseya should be doing well. And in terms of how well, Fred said that they think they will be growing this year in the mid-30s organically. So not in terms of, through acquisitions or whatever, just revenue growth, mid-30% through organic growth, EBITDA growth approaching 40%. So they're foreseeing a really solid year. Beyond that, this is like a hint. It was interesting, actually. Kaseya will be announcing something a few weeks from now that Fred Vacola really, really wanted to tell me about. He's super excited about this. He was just itching to tell me about it, but he can't. All I know is it's coming soon. They are not buying anybody. They are not going public. They are not selling to. This is not an M&A related transaction. Kaseya is often in the news in relation to that. But they've got something very big. And in terms of how big Fred thinks it is, he said, that buying Datto last year, that was a big story. This is that big. But he wouldn't tell me what it is.
I know exactly what it is. They're integrating ChatGPT into Datto.
maybe I can give you one quote. This is what, and you can sort of play around with this all you want. What could this mean? But he said, after this has happened, quote, they will, he's talking about end users now, not channel partners, end users, quote, they will know Kaseya, they will know MSPs, and they will all want to have their IT and security managed by a Kaseya MSP. So it sure sounds like some sort of big end user directed marketing lead gen campaign. I don't know. But that's the one hint that I got. Something big's coming, and we're going to hear about it. I think within the next month.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, Matt, I mean, other than that little teaser about something big coming, you know, thinking back to the Folgers marketing campaigns back in the day, like are they going to do billboards that say like the mountain is coming and tease this thing out, or what do you think? What's your take?
I mean, I'm dying to know what the news is. Did they kick everyone off Reddit who doesn't like them? No, I mean, I do think going back to like the news about the you know, that macroeconomics, you know, being bad and like I hope he's right. I really do, obviously, because we are an MSP. I can also see where he makes sense, because even going back to COVID, we were lucky enough that we didn't have anybody in a market that really lost their business, like luckily as a customer, but we stayed steady and we grew after that. And I think that solidified you as a partner. And I think it's sort of a similar opportunity. COVID, you know, made you solidify yourself as a partner. And I talked to the local business journal during COVID. And I said, this is like, you know, April of 2020, I said, either everyone's going to love their MSP or they're going to fire them as soon as they feel comfortable going back, you know, whatever they have to do it. And that's exactly what happened. You know, I feel like once September, October, you know, we're in Florida, COVID didn't exist here. Once a few months later hit, we had people that were just like, never call me again, appreciate it, but we love our people because they helped us work from home. And other people are like, please, for the love of God, get me off, because it was a nightmare. And I think it's sort of similar here, not in the same obvious thing, but like, I think we have an opportunity as MSPs to really be a partner and help them with those things, you know, with hopefully not just discounting it, because I don't think that's the answer, but like you know, Fred McCullough apparently said, if you can help their efficiency, which is, we do security and everything, but we have to make them efficient. And that's a lot of what the products, a lot of these vendors offer, that I hope that, you know, we can utilize to do that. So I agree, and I hope he's right.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, and we'll table some of the macroeconomic discussion for when Jay McBain comes on, because we're gonna have plenty, I'm sure, to talk about there and get his take on that. But you know, good DattoCon's living on. That's nice. You know, I still think they need to figure out a way to like combine names or make it Kasato or do something, because the whole Kaseya Datto with everything is getting a little confusing. So they got some branding work to do. Maybe ChatGPT can give them some brand suggestions. You know, how do we rename this company, ChatGPT, and we'll see what kind of options it comes up with. But it's all good stuff. Rich, anything else to kind of talk about here, or are we going to move on to cyber liability, which I'm excited to get to?
Let's do that.
So, okay, let's get to cyber liability. Rich, cyber liability, go.
So we are referring here to a column that appeared in the most recent issue of our monthly magazine here at ChannelPro. It was written by our good friend Joshua Lieberman of Net Sciences, an MSP solution provider system builder in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Very good writer, contributes to the magazine for us several times a year. And this particular piece, I love the headline. Josh's headline was "Cyber Liability, Your New Best Friend," because he approaches the cyber liability topic from kind of a positive point of view, essentially. And by cyber liability, he's talking about cyber insurance, obviously, and you know, getting protection from cyber related liability. So first thing, and you know, he talks about this. I've heard other people talk about this. In some respects, cyber insurance companies are an MSP's best friend, because they're only offering protection to customers, to end users who are doing the right things, checking off all the boxes on this increasingly long checklist of security best practices. And it's one thing for your MSP to tell you need to do all these things. If you have an insurance company saying, we will not protect you from ransomware, and everybody is now, unlike a few years ago, aware of the dangers of ransomware, you can't get insurance unless you do these things. That actually helps grease the conversation a little bit with the MSP about actually investing in these things. And so in that sense, cyber liability, cyber insurance, is an MSP's best friend. There is another angle on this, and this is a little bit different, actually. This is a way in which this whole issue maybe isn't a great thing for MSPs. But, Josh was talking about the fact that I've heard about from others as well, that there are a lot of end users out there who think, I don't need cyber insurance because you've got insurance, Mr. or Ms. MSP, and that's going to cover me. Which is not true at all, as we all know here, but the customers don't necessarily know that all the time. And we can get into this with Matt. I'll be curious to hear what he thinks about this. But once upon a time, Josh had a statement in his MSA, his Master Services Agreement, that required his customers to have cyber insurance. He eventually took that out. But he does put wording in there now that makes it explicit. My insurance does not insure you. So if you choose not to have insurance, you're on your own if something goes wrong. And then there's a final and kind of interesting observation he makes. I kind of alluded to this a little bit before. I mean, it used to be you talked to SMBs about ransomware and they didn't know what you were talking about. And if you talk to them about spending money on security, they didn't necessarily understand why they needed to do that, or they were resistant to doing that. I'll be curious to get Matt's take on this as well. But what Josh said is that conversation has shifted in the last year or two, and the clients are willing to pay. It's sort of the inconvenience factor of implementing some of these technologies, the disruption, et cetera, that can still be a bit of a barrier. So anyway, it's a 2-page piece from the magazine. We have a link to it in the show notes. I encourage people to read the whole thing because there's a lot more to it than what I just ran through here. But it also brings up some interesting topics to just chat about amongst ourselves.
Yeah, it's funny, Rich, you say that. I've got bigger into understanding the cyber insurance world. I guess we first about in mid to late 2021, we were shopping our own insurance and ended up getting hooked up with TechRug, who does a lot of tech E&O, which is what MSPs need. And boy, just going through the difference of getting underwritten for that as opposed to when we were with our local vendor who gave it to us, 4 years ago, and it was different and it was, much better. And there was a lot more I had to give them to show them what we're doing, because we as an MSP have a huge responsibility. But yeah, we got into it to the point where then at IT Nation Secure last year, I sat in a 4-hour session that was done by Fifth Wall, and we have a huge partnership. And I was actually just on a webinar a month ago with Huntress and a couple others talking about cyber insurance. So we've, probably just like Joshua, we just dive head first. And I think I agree with everything he's basically said in that article. I think we've all kind of said that it is kind of our best friend because we talk about it to our clients and to sales prospects, and we bring it up because somebody who doesn't, I think it sets us apart. And it's nobody likes regulation, nobody wants government regulation, but there is no barrier of entry for anyone to just be an MSP tomorrow. They can just be like, I'm an MSP. Why? I just like computers. Us showing that we have it and understanding what it is for the client, it makes you as an MSP look on a different pedestal. So on the good parts.
And that's a really important thing that, I've been kind of thinking about, because I talk to a lot of MSPs who, they want to talk about cyber insurance, but they want to talk about what a pain in the neck it is, and filling out the questionnaires, and getting coverage, getting claims paid, and so on. It's become this burden for a lot of people. But I really kind of feel like there is an opportunity out there to turn it into a competitive tool.
Yep.
Or a business generating tool, and that's the way you really should be looking at this. And it sounds like that's what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I it's what we've learned over time. We, because the companies because there's at least a couple of companies out there. Again, I have my relationship with one that will kind of partner with you in this. And unless you're a licensed agent, first off, you don't actually do anything. So like, it's kind of like the whole thing of like have your MSAs reviewed by a lawyer, even if someone gives it to you. Same thing with insurance. You can't give them advice on what policy to get. You need someone to help you, but there's companies that will help you with that. We actually had one of them send somebody out to Orlando to do a dinner in September, and we hosted some customers, some prospects, did a wine dinner, talked about what cyber insurance was, and they don't. They for the record also, they don't give you a cut, and that's fine. I'm not, I don't need every vendor to give me $1, but I know that if I get them connected to get their policy, it's good. It's a good policy. It's covering them. It's kind of like I say all the time. We have our vendors that do like low voltage cabling. I want them to use the people I know, because I know when we plug in the cable, good to go. Because our guy, same thing here is like if they get their policy through them, I know that they've asked all the right questions. And the questionnaire, even though we're helping them fill it out, is right. That if something does happen, I'm comfortable that everything's going to go right. Not obviously, it's not if, it's when they have an incident. That's the whole thing. But I can feel really comfortable. They have the right policy. We're covered. As much as nobody wants to have an incident, they should feel like they were, treated the right way the whole time. And yeah, we make it part of the whole partnership we have with our clients.
So Josh in here also talks a lot about leveraging cyber liability insurance to kind of drive customers to do what they probably should have been doing all along, and that's actually take security seriously. Are you finding the new cyber liability requirements driving some additional sales for your customers, or getting your customers to do what you want?
Yeah, it actually drove us internally to make a decision on that. But yeah, it is, because it used to be that we kind of had the whole 3 plans thing. And I think all the books on MSPs tell you to have a gold, silver, a platinum, gold, whatever it is. We had that kind of thing. And, even the bad one wasn't bad. It was just kind of low. And we actually moved to 1 plan last summer. And it was partially because there were so many things because every policy can be a little different. Sometimes they require this or they mean this. And with our, 1 plan now, you're getting what you're getting. You can't take things out of it, but we're covering the controls that are very necessary today, and probably building in some of the controls that might be needed 6 months or a year from now, because they're always going to kind of change. For a while ago, it was just MFA, and then it became, offsite backup. There's just different things you needed. And so we've just moved to that. And for existing customer, it was kind of like, hey, you got to move to this plan. Because they're getting their cyber renewals and when we're helping them answer the questions, we're saying no, and they know that they might not. They're going to probably get coverage even with a no to certain questions, but they might get a small discount if they move to yes. Our extra cost is blank. That cost for a year is this, but again, they're going to have a much tougher time if they have something happen. So yeah, I definitely think it's helping in that nature. And it's worth the time we've spent, and it's a lot of time internally, because it definitely comes out in the wash. And if nothing else, it makes me sleep a lot better at night knowing that our customers actually have the security they need. Whereas if somebody didn't, I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night wondering, oh my God, something happened and they don't have the right coverages. So it
Right.
makes me feel better too.
Right. So do your customers give you a lot of pushback? You said you went to like 1 tier, are you finding them that they're not complaining about that, or some dragging their heels?
I mean, they're not. There's probably a couple customers that just in general, you always have your churn from whatever reason. So we probably have some stuff that we have to look at. But I will say, most of our customers were actually already close to that, so that was a good thing for us. And then new customers don't. We try our best to really, in our sales cycle, really talk to what we are. So by the time we get to here's what we cost, it's probably still shocking to them, because everyone wants to pay $1, but they're not asking, because I made it clear, they're not saying, all right, cool, but can you take out all this stuff? So I don't think I think it's, and I found more and more, for the longest time, I felt like if we were up against some other MSP, someone else would be half our price. I don't feel like we're having that anymore, whether it's that people aren't going to that half price MSP or whether they've raised their prices. So it's almost, I feel like whether it's the market, whether it's everything, has raised the playing field a little bit too.
Yeah, I think we're all getting to the point where like there's no compromise on security. Like you can't have this and not have this part. Like you really do have to have it all, or nothing, or nothing, and then like it's the Wild West, but you really kind of have to have it all. So that's good. That's good. That's good to see that that you're you're using all kind of this new security-based world and cyber liability to kind of push that. Any other thoughts about the article that I know you probably perused it? Any other highlights in there that you found valuable? And we'll just kind of send everybody to go read it because there's a lot in here.
The one thing that Rich talked about, and the whole thing that Joshua had the mark about requiring cyber liability and then took it out, we actually just put it in. And granted, you talk to different attorneys. Some just say we highly recommend. We put it in there because if anything, we're kind of predicting the time when, because I'm already getting to the point where like our underwriters for ourselves kind of need us to send declination notices if somebody doesn't want to do a control. So if someone said, I mean, that doesn't happen. Like easiest example, someone said, I want MFA. First off, I hope they're not my client anymore, but I need to send them a note saying you understand the risks. We're not responsible. At some point, first off, if they don't want cyber insurance, then they're not going to want the rest of our services. They're going to be wanting something inexpensive. So we put it in there just because, again, if they're reading through that and they're considering our services, it's clear as day. And again, take us seriously. So we actually added that in just recently.
I want to move on in a second, but I want to ask one follow-up question to that. How many of your customers are just saying, well, you know what, I'm just not going to bother with cyber liability insurance? Are any of them considering that due to the costs and the hassle? Or is everybody like, I got to have it no matter what?
Their initial reaction is, why do I need this? And we try our best. And again, we've been educating ourselves so we can talk to it. And once we kind of have a conversation with them and they understand the things like Rich talked about, that our insurance doesn't cover you. You know, like unless we're completely negligent, it really isn't gets our insurance, you know, like unless they can. So once we understand that and talk to them about it, they don't love it. I mean, who wants to spend more money, but they get what it helps them with. And if you throw out things like, you know, public relations and lawyers' fees, and you realize how much it's usually put in the terms of money when this happens, that's what typically gets them to change their mind. So we haven't had an issue with somebody saying no. Initially, they're like, no, I don't want it. And then it's like, well, let's talk. And then they can typically morph over.
Very interesting. Well, we're going to put a link to this article in the show notes page, as well as our news stories too. So if you're listening on your phone, you know, we're just kind of giving our thoughts on these. There's always a lot more information, so you can open up the description area on your phone. We'll put the links for you in there. If it doesn't have those in there, you can go to the show sheet at channelpronetwork.com, episode 256. You'll find all the links there. If you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe, hit the bell, hit the like, put a comment in, hit all the buttons. Don't hit the thumbs down though. We don't like the thumbs down button. Any other button on YouTube is good, other than that one. But yeah, you'll find in the description area there on YouTube, we put all the links so you can kind of go read along as we talk about it, because there's lots of other stuff, lots of good information. It's a great article by Mr. Joshua Liberman. Always a great to see his name on the website on a piece of content. You know it's going to be good. All right, with that, we are going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be joined with Jay McBain. He's the chief analyst for global channels at Canalys, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff. What are we going to talk about? Well, we teased it earlier, some of it macroeconomic stuff, but I'm not going to tell you everything. You just have to join us on the other side of the break to find out what we're going to talk about. So we'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. Matt Rose is still with us here, and we got a great interview guest lined up for you. One that is always a pleasure to have on the show. He's been here before. And what are we going to be talking about? Well, everyone is talking about the current economic climate, wondering what trends and stuff will emerge over the course of the year and how these trends will impact vendors and their partners. Now, there is no one better in the channel to talk about this with than the one and only Jay McBain, chief analyst for global channels at Canalys. Welcome, Jay.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. I'm excited to have this conversation.
It is always a pleasure to have you on the show, because you are the elite premier analyst in this business for sure, and it's always a pleasure to have you on. And you're always very well spoken and insightful and have lots of cool things to say. But don't let me kind of introduce you to the world. Why don't you take a couple minutes to tell us a little bit more about you, your role at Canalys, and kind of your history, because you've been in the channel a long time, and most people may have heard of you by now, most likely, but some may not. They've been living under a rock or on the moon or something. So tell us about you, Jay.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I've been around the channel for just close to 30 years now. I've been a channel chief at big companies like IBM and Lenovo. I've been an entrepreneur building a channel software company for 5 or 6 years now. I've got a chance. And I tell people I don't really have a day job. And it's not that I'm any smarter than any of the people I work with. It's just I have a lot of more free time. to read articles about supply chain and currency and inflation and the war in Europe, and try to take the 12 or 14 macro trends right now and bring it back to the MSP community and what does it mean. And no one can predict the future, but there's likely scenarios that happen, and some of those may relate to 2008 and 2001. And so the best that we can put together, kind of the facts and data and get the most likely outcomes, we can do a little bit of planning and obviously think about it deeper.
So let me guess, when you were a kid, you were really, really good at those like connect the dot worksheets that you got in school. Did you like the first one always done with those?
Yeah, so I had an accountant as a father, so everything was explained to me in logical 7th decimal point language. And so when I was 11, I created my own Quicken program and started saving every dollar I spent or earned from my very first paper route. I started digitizing and scanning all the pictures and documents in my life. So I might be the only one, since literally the 1980s that's 100% digital and have been in real time my entire life. So when I look at something, to the chagrin of my wife, it is always, mathematical or logical first, and then kind of emotional or second, or maybe not at all.
Wow. So you're a Florida man, and you mentioned that you have a motorcycle. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I'm a Canadian living in Florida, so it's kind of like living on vacation. And I have young kids, so I don't get to go out motorcycling a lot. But when I do, I tend to either go to shows in Orlando, Tampa, Miami, all within driving distance. Makes for a great 12-month riding. And then, by the way, that's my airport trick. So all 3 of my airports here, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach, all have motorcycle parking basically for free right at TSA. So I throw on a backpack or a small bag, because I'm usually just an overnight type of trip, and I park right at TSA, and within minutes I'm at my gate. And again, when I jump off the plane, within minutes I'm on the turnpike coming home. So I actually ride by motorcycle to the airport.
Wow, for a second when you said you jump off the plane, I actually thought like on your way back you're like parachuting from the plane, landing on the motorcycle like James Bond and taking off.
Seems like a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible type of scene there.
Totally. What kind of motorcycle? That's a really good advice, by the way. So folks, if you have a motorcycle, that might be a good way to get parking. I don't know if that works at O'Hare though, because I think at O'Hare, they make it so that way, no matter where you park, anywhere around O'Hare, it takes an hour to get into the actual airport. But what kind of motorcycle is it?
Yeah, I drive a sport bike. It goes back when I was 15, Top Gun came out, the original. And, I watched him on that motorcycle with the jet in behind going to get the girl. I was 15, full of hormones. I told you that I had my own Quicken program. So a couple of, data searches and what it would take back then, which was $4,000. I bought that bike. And when I turned 16, I rode to, high school on that bike with a bomber jacket and the aviators and everything else. And that's the bike I kind of have today, that sport bike. But when I moved to the US, I bought a Harley because I thought that's what every American does. So I had a little, V-Rod with, $5,000 of chrome on it. But in Florida, those get very hot when you sit at red lights and you burn your legs and stuff. So I went back to like a plastic encased kind of sport bike.
Was it like a Kawasaki or what?
It's a Honda.
A Honda. Okay, cool.
So back to the, accountant as a father. You calculate depreciation, you calculate fuel economy, and you do the whole total cost of ownership. And, a Honda CBR is the best bike when you combine all of those things.
Jay McBain, always connecting the dots, looking ahead, looking at trends. And that's kind of what we're talking about. So we are talking about, the current economic climate. We're talking about trends that are going to kind of come. Why don't you first, Jay, give us a quick high level view of what is the current economic climate?
Yeah, so from a macro perspective, we're all reading in the newspaper every day. We're still in pre-recessionary terms. It is a tale of two cities. It's not affecting everyone. It's not affecting every country. Places like India are off the charts right now in growth. And everybody's just in a state of worry. We went through 2008. It was impactful, but it was also a long time ago. For the 260,000 people that have been laid off in the last 4 months in our industry, many of them that are turning 40 years old as millennials have never been through a layoff. I remember my early days at IBM in the 90s. We went through a layoff literally every quarter, every year. It was just a common thing. And now you have people that have lived their entire life since college for 14 years and have never faced this adversity before. The good news, is that we have 260 technically skilled people. Their salaries are being kind of revamped. You're not making 300K at Google anymore or at AWS. So this is a benefit for MSPs. And, for those that took COVID and went and lived either closer to home or found a nice place on a mountaintop in Montana. I mean, it spread technology and talent around. And for many local MSPs, all of a sudden you've got access to talent that you might not have in the past. The second piece is a bunch of entrepreneurs. Many of the people that were laid off were working on moonshots, self-driving cars and Internet of Things, AI, automation, blockchain, quantum, AR, VR, MR, like the metaverse. And they're working on all these like crazy things. And when belts tighten, those are the departments that get cut. So are they going to go and work at McDonald's? No, they're probably going to join the cast of 200,000 ISVs or 800,000 emerging tech companies and go figure out their own entrepreneurial journey. And this could, help elevate the channel as well, working with these, in a partnering mode, serving clients.
So just by the by, one of the other things a lot of people have never experienced before beyond layoffs is interest rates north of zero. And I want to kind of circle back to that at some point. But we spoke earlier on the show today about a conversation I had this week with Kaseya, in which their CEO said, we foresee a very difficult 24-month macroeconomic climate ahead. But we also, foresee 30% top line growth, 40% or close to 40% EBITDA growth, because the MSP, the managed services market, is a very different story maybe than the tech industry as a whole, the economy as a whole. So if you kind of forecast what this current set of economic conditions looks like for ChannelPro readers and our ChannelPro Weekly audience, what does that look like?
Yeah, so to set the stage, I mean, anything around interest rates and, a little bit of a freeze on free cash or capital, has an impact. One of the major impacts that isn't being talked about enough is one of the benefits of a recurring model, one of the benefits of a predictable model for customers is the fact that it's kind of locked in. And MSPs, over the last 22 years, but again, 14 of those last years have been in good, solid economic times, free flow of cash, free flow of low interest rates, all kinds of goodness. But when you're locking in 1 year or longer agreements on monthly charges, that $113 per PC or per user, that can come back and hurt you when your gasoline prices go up in your rolling trucks, when your salary expenses, when the inflationary, all the cost of goods sold and all of the SG&A expenses start pressuring. Now you look back, MSPs have actually been very poor over the last 22 years at raising prices. They haven't been great at sales and marketing and raising prices. And in a case like this, if this was a prolonged, if Kaseya says, 1 to 2 years, this could start to have an impact. Very difficult conversations. We're surveying MSPs and asking the question if, they're able to raise prices the same way that Microsoft and Cisco and everybody are so easy to do. How do you pass that along when it's in a fixed price contract? The second thing is MSPs, it's also a tale of multiple cities. Out of the 76,000 MSPs, the average size is 8 people. An owner principal that does everything, not only sales and marketing, but also HR and strategy and operations and finance, everything else, and 7 technicians usually. Barely a salesperson. And so in that environment, you've got a quarter of MSPs around the world that actually lose money. You've got a quarter of MSPs on top of that struggle to break even month in, month out, paying the mortgage on a consistent basis. You got 25% of MSPs at the top that are making money hand over fist. And that's where the M&A market has gone. Private equity have looked at that and said, someone that has 7 employees working in a smaller region is almost impossible to break even at a 17% profit. But in a model where you can roll that up and have more of a franchise model, any business that generates that at a national level or a regional level can kick out a lot of cash. So that's the whole story. And this is a market, though, that you have a lot of the market still in struggle zone. And it's going to be turbulent times if this prolongs.
So we've kind of touched on interest rates. Obviously, interest rates are still much higher than they've been in many years, and that makes borrowing and financing transactions more difficult. You were kind of talking about, layoffs and belt tightening going on inside the vendor community. And one of the things I've been just kind of thinking about and really want to hear your thoughts about is how all of that affects the vendors that our audience do business with. Meaning, I assume we will see less M&A activity, for example, among vendors, just because it's harder to kind of finance those deals. Could there be less innovation because they don't have as much money to spend on R&D? How do you think the economic climate, the financial climate will affect vendors, and what will that mean for the channel pros who partner with them?
Yeah, so first of all, again, it comes in levels. I mean, when you look at the 35,000 vendors who have an MSP program today, that's the entire long tail. When you go to the very top, the big tech companies, even though they're laying off 12,000 people, or 9%, guess what? They added hundreds of thousands of people during COVID. So if you look at the chart, it's been on a hockey stick, and the top of the hockey stick now is just kind of tailing off a little bit. But this isn't significant. It's less than a haircut for these very, very large companies. And for them, it's been selective of going after moonshots and a couple of departments that may not make strategic sense. But it hasn't been as impactful for partner teams and for marketing teams as a normal layoff cycle would. So that's number one. You talked about, capital. Many of the largest vendors, the hundreds of them that kind of sit in that Fortune 500, are very rich with cash. They went through a period, and of the last year or so, you just saw Cisco's earnings yesterday. They're all in kind of supply chain issues, and they're flushing that now. The prices are higher, and they're making more money and growth than ever before. And so they have some fuel. Cisco decided to raise some of the shareholder returns and things like that, play around with a little bit of the stock price. But if any of these big companies want to come and make some reasonable sized acquisitions, there is money in the bank. The second thing is technology industry is the one that's been most affected on the stock market. So, some of these bubble valuations are down 80 and 90%, making some of these technologies, which are good technologies run by good companies, very, very affordable. So again, you've got money in the bank and you've got a depleted market. This is time, when you buy low and sell high, this might be a time. But again, it's a story of big tech again. A lot of the mid-size and smaller tech companies, vendors, have to tighten their own belts. And you're seeing almost every day on layoffs.fyi, you're seeing about a dozen announcements of 10 to 15% cuts. That does come into the partnering department, channel department. It does come into marketing. Partners will see an impact to that in terms of the coverage model. That local rep that managed your province or a couple of states, may now have 4 or 5 states or 2 or 3 provinces, instead of having you and 20 other partners to cover. So these are all things. They're all going to hit at once. From a macro scale, though, looking backwards, in 2008, 2001, the technology industry brought the world out of recession. For all the surveys we're doing with partners, over half of them are investing more in marketing. They're investing in hiring. So they got this idea that they're going to come out of this stronger than they went in. And that optimism and that idea that history is going to repeat, I think will probably come true, because that's the energy that's going into the world. And as our customers in 27 industries are going through these same problems, trying to become technology companies themselves, having their company get taken over by software, guess what they're doing? They're investing more in technology to transform themselves, become more effective, efficient, build out the workflows and processes and business logic that make them more resilient to downturns like this as well. So we're in a good position. This is the right industry to be in. And no one knows the level of depth that it may or may not hit. But I would say there's still a confidence that we're in the right spot.
I want to bring our guest host in at this point, actually, because we can talk to a real live MSP now about what he and his company is doing. So I had two questions, Matt. And first off, before we completely leave the vendor conversation behind, have you seen any differences in terms of your relationship with the vendors, their ability to support you, the roadmap, anything like that? And then the other is, are you kind of leaning into the opportunity going forward that Jay was just talking about?
Yeah, so first, I don't think we're seeing it too much, but one question that was kind of in my mind, Jay, as we were talking there, and I kind of I almost think I heard my own or got my own answer, but when you say that these larger companies have cash in the bank, but then you also talk about, there may not be the investors and the PE backing, may change. There's obviously the larger MSP vendors, like they're the ones that have the money in the bank, but then you have some of these smaller ones that we saw some of them go through layoffs last year. And obviously they have some really cool, really cutting edge technology. And I almost see it either as they're going to slow down or have to slow down. And that what you said about that your rep may be covering 3 states instead of 1 kind of thing. But it's weird. I see that, and I'm curious where you see that, like some of these smaller companies doing some really cool stuff that are startups and getting all this investment for a while. Is that the opportunity for those larger vendors to try to pick them off because they have cash in the bank, or are they going to flounder? Because that would be my worry too. Because I'm looking at some of the, there's so many great startups over the past year or two. They're doing some awesome stuff with automation, automated documentation, things like that. And you kind of question, do you want them to get bought up by that large company and potentially get kind of put on the shelf, but you want them to keep doing what they're doing? And I'm just kind of curious on that. And I'd love to hear your answer, and then I can answer, Rich, your second question about what we're doing.
Yeah. So if I define the really cool things that MSPs are doing, I look at it, kind of from a logical perspective in the 250 categories of cool things they could be doing. IoT, AI, automation, blockchain, quantum, AR, VR, MR, the metaverse, self-driving. Where are they doing cool things? And then what is the growth rate there? Because right now we know that managed services, we had predicted we're going to grow at, 12 or 13%, but that could grow, that could drop into single digits, high single digits, if our customers are put in a position to, have to pull back. So now you start comparing that to the hyperscalers that are growing between 30 and 40, the SaaS companies that are growing at 30, the RPA, robotic process automation companies growing at 70.
Yep.
And you look at all these opportunities, and when you talk about cool things, it's not in most cases innovation on the managed services model itself. It solved a ridiculously large problem that I was a part of, selling PCs 20 years ago, right, with total cost of ownership that was so bad that we couldn't even publish it. And managed services and the providers around the world created a $300 billion market solving how bad of a problem that was, making for customers a predictable, things like that. But that market itself, it's growing by double digits. It's a great place to be. But there's also, with technology skills and great customer relationships, and again, your customers becoming tech companies themselves, there's so many other industry ways to dabble and to get into some of these higher growth engines and leave the managed services business as what it is. Hopefully a business that throws out predictable revenue and cash flow to fund some of these other mini moonshots that grab onto your customers and grab onto bigger opportunities. So that's kind of the bifurcation right now of MSPs. The ones that still think that there's a market because X, there's going to be more hybrid servers, there's going to be more PCs and stuff, and it's going to be a good market to be in. The others are always looking out to where are the opportunities. What skills do I need? What practices do I need to build? What kind of partnerships should I be exploring? The average customer today has 7 partners. There is no single throat to choke. There is no trusted advisor anymore. So do you know the 6 other partners that are in calling on the CMO or the CFO, the other people in the company? And are you working on those projects with them? Because they happen to be rich. And last thing I'm going to say is it's come out to a new language. I mentioned that we never mentioned the TCO in client server because it was so bad. Cloud companies are yelling from the rooftops what their TCO is. So we just work with AWS, and in reInvent, they announced $6.40. For every dollar of AWS that's consumed, partners like you can go make $6.40. That's not a managed service today. Nobody's figured out how to do MSP for the cloud truly to be repeatable, and a big part of that, only about $1 of that $6 is managed. So what are the other $5? A lot of it's project-based. Some of it's software-based, integration, implementation-based. Wherever it is in the equation, we've got the skills to go do that. We could go hire some of those 260,000 that have been laid off to go plug into some of these markets. And that comes at 80% margins, not 17. So it's a different equation for those MSPs, to answer your question.
Very cool. That's great. Appreciate that. And then Rich, to answer your question. So from a standpoint of our MSP, so first off, we fall right in line with where Jay was saying the average size of MSP is. That you described us fairly well, except I'm lucky enough to have somebody who helps me with HR administration, whatnot. But and lucky enough, we're not in that bottom 50 that I wouldn't want to be there. So I'm somewhere on that other side. But what we've been doing is we're going to what was talked about. We're trying to invest both in people, both in hiring, possibly to the point of being a little overstaffed, to make sure everything's weeded out. We have everything working the way it should, and even investing in those things like automation, security, and things, to the point where we've honestly said that if we somehow didn't have any growth for the year, our profit may be down a little bit, but we're also kind of putting ourselves in a better position because we're seeing prospects we talk to now that are more interested in AI, that are more interested in security, they're more interested in their overall efficiencies and security somehow. And I can't do that on the fly. I kind of have to have that built in, then I can multiply and replicate it. So yeah, we've been totally, we're really okay with that, of saying like, we may have had a better profit a few years ago, and luckily as a company, we were in a comfortable spot, but I want to be able to take that money, get the resources, those companies, those partnerships that, somebody comes to me and they're a pretty good opportunity or a large opportunity. I want to be able to take them on fairly, obviously never easy to onboard a new company. There's always gotchas, but we're leaning into it. We really are.
So I don't know if I got this from an interview you did at some point, Jay, or a blog you wrote, but I remember you saying not too long ago that in difficult economic times, it's a smart thing for channel partners to do and this is probably a quote, double down on partnerships. And so what did you have in mind? What kind of partnerships? What does it mean to like double down on that because you're in a sluggish economy?
Yeah, so the one thing I harp back to is that every one of your customers at a mid-size or larger today has 7 partners they trust. And that's according to McKinsey. That's overall, kind of research. So over my shoulder, there's a Venn diagram of 20 different kind of partner types. This isn't competing for managed services dollars. This isn't competing even for any kind of resell or anything. They're in doing different things. So at that mid-sized customer over the last couple of years, the head of marketing is more likely now to be spending more money on technology than the head of technology. So the head of marketing has 9,932 ISVs on their MarTech ad tech stack that they're busy investing in and integrating and implementing. So who is taking up that slack? Because every one of those dollars, by the way, kicks out $6. If your Salesforce is $6.19, if your HubSpot, it's $5.80. But in front of that buyer, there are digital agencies. 78% of the 200,000 digital agencies now call themselves tech services firms. You have to go to page 4 of their website to find out they'll do creative work for you too. So accountants, 81% of accountants are now tech services firms. Again, page 4, you'll find they do auditing and accounting and taxation work too. So they're calling on the CMO and the CFO. 75% of software today, and that's the fastest growing market, 75% of it is bought outside of IT. So when I look at the average MSP, one of my pieces of advice is, next time you go visit your customer, take a view of the guest book. There's an 80% chance that everyone signing in is talking tech. Who are they and who are they going to visit inside that company? The odds are they're talking tech. And so inside of that, there's a bunch of things that those digital agencies just don't do. They don't work on the actual execution of the technology. They don't layer in the 7-layer stack, and they don't do the implementation, the integration. They don't secure it. They don't build AI and data lakes around it. I mean, there's inside the $6, there's a lot of services to be had. And partnering with that agency, partnering with that accounting firm, partnering with that regional system integrator, partnering with the ISVs, the 9,932 of them. Partnering is one of those things you can do easily. And you'll find when you do your Venn diagram, you'll compete in some places and you won't compete in 90% of the other places.
I can't help myself. I've got to tell a story that showed up at the beginning of an article that was in a recent issue of our monthly magazine. To your point about, IT purchasing happening outside IT. And the story, it was like a Fortune 100 or 500 company. The CIO is walking up the hallway. Out of the corner of his eye, he notices somebody's using Salesforce. And he kind of leans in, wait, we're using Salesforce. Long story short, he goes and looks into it. And this company, where he is the CIO, had a Salesforce account with 20,000 users, and he didn't know.
Right.
That kind of thing is happening all over the place. So what you were just talking about, though, a moment ago, I think is a great lead into something else I wanted to get into while we've got you here, because you've been talking a lot, particularly, I think, in the last year, about what you are calling the decade of the ecosystem. And so I want to get into that a little bit with you, but let's start by defining terms. What do you mean by an ecosystem in this context?
Yeah, simply an ecosystem is two things put together. 75% of world trade flows indirectly. You bought your last car from a dealer, you bought your last TV from a retailer, you bought your last jar of peanut butter from a grocer. Every industry, 75%. In our industry, the $4.5 trillion that businesses and governments spent last year, 73.3% of it went through the channel. So that's one side, and we've called it channels of distribution for 40 years. What do you call the other 6 partners that are trusted? That agency, that integrator. I used to call them shadow channels because they're there, they're influential, but we're just not measuring them because they don't collect the customer's money. Well, the decade of the ecosystem is that now we are. And so you've seen some changes in the last 12 months. One is that there are these new chief partner officers at our vendors, vendors like Microsoft, vendors like IBM and AWS and Dell and others have announced these new chief partner officers. The channel chief that would have, kind of shown up on the, on the road reports to these new chief partner officers. Other vice presidents at that level handle marketing. Those 28 moments before a customer makes vendor selection, they're in there working on marketing, not on sales. Other partners are working on customer success. Our industry is moving almost all the way over to subscription consumption. You've got major corporations from client server like Dell and Cisco. You've got HPE GreenLake. You've got Lenovo. All these companies have dedicated 100% towards subscription models, which means the point of sale is only the first 30 days with the customer. Now, every 30 days after that, the implementations, the integrations, the management of every 30 days, that's why MSPs are so important to these vendors, is to get a customer for life. But that's a different kind of vice president. It's not a sales vice president, it's a customer success vice president in the channel. Products are all being built now in ecosystems. If you build a software product, you're automatically a partnering company because you built it on AWS or Microsoft, or you built it on Salesforce or HubSpot. You're partnering from day one in product. So in all these areas, there's 6 vice presidents now, and 5 of them never get involved at the point of sale. Even the point of sale vice president, the channel chief, is being asked to grow marketplaces as an indirect sale, but different than traditional resale through distribution. Money changes hands differently. They're being asked to grow the direct business, but knowing that 96% of those deals are partner assisted. Like marketplaces are growing the fastest right now, 84% compounded. And we're calling 45 billion by 2025, but 24% of those marketplace deals are partners clicking buy on behalf of the customer. So they didn't take the money, they don't show up on some distributor report, but they literally have their finger on the trigger. So these chief partner officers now recognize partners whether they take the money or not, and trying to recognize all 7, recruit them. Microsoft's bringing on 400 new partners a day. They're bringing out new programs. Microsoft brought out a point system, which simply pulls money away from the point of sale, and and spreads it like peanut butter. There's money to be made from Microsoft before, during, and after the point of sale. They put 2/3 of the points today post-sale. Guess who followed? I mean, you had Okta and VMware. You just had IBM a few weeks ago. So everybody's kind of talking to us about point systems now. And partners who are out there, like Matt, who are doing great work all through the customer journey, not just, making sure they buy a certain vendor's product, should get credit for all that great work they're doing. And they should be able to make more than they make today just at that point of sale, because that's becoming reduced in terms of the value of how these channels work. So transactional plus non-transactional equals ecosystem.
And so to the extent that especially the major vendors, I'm sure smaller ones as well, are focused more on constructing and benefiting from ecosystems. But how does that, you just named one way that affects channel partners downstream. How does it potentially benefit them? If you're listening to this podcast or watching it and thinking, okay, how do I respond to that trend in a way that helps me grow better, faster? What do you suggest?
Yeah, there'd be two things that I would think about, because, I know these new 20 chief partner officers, none of them were channel chiefs in the past. They don't talk, and that's on purpose. Many of them come from Boston Consulting or Bain or McKinsey, like kind of really smart people to go figure this all out. But they're not just channel chiefs getting a promotion into the C-suite. And that's on purpose because of that move to the other 6 partners. So the language they're speaking are things like co-innovation, value creation at scale, network effects. These are areas where you can have a broader conversation with a vendor that recognizes so many more of the things that you're doing with that client than, again, taking their money and, kind of providing that 30-day recurring support after. That's one. 2 is I would start pushing these vendors, because there's at least a dozen of them now talking in this multiplier language. The next time I have a QBR, the next time I have a chance to attend one of these events and have a couple of executive, one-on-ones, I'd be asking about the multiplier. So here I am, like Matt, I've got, a great team, we're growing, we're doing great work and stuff, but I want to double my business with you, vendor. What are the skills? What are the practices? If I'm a little larger, what is the M&A I should be doing? But guide me to where the most profitable, most tangential or adjacent business, the lowest hanging fruit is, where I can take my business with you from X to Y in 12 months, and you can help fund me do that. That's going to open up the ears of people in these more ecosystem models, and less to the salespeople that phone you up every week asking you how much you sold and how much you're going to sell next week. I would start avoiding those calls and try to get with the people talking this new language, because that's where the profitability, that's where these big growth, 30-40% growth numbers are in these new conversations.
So Matt, as one of those partners downstream, are you having those kinds of conversations with vendors? What is your take on that?
I feel like I haven't seen too much of it yet. Obviously the Microsoft one, and it's funny, I think it was hard to see as a lot of MSPs, because if you go on Reddit or whatever, when that Microsoft partner thing changed, it was, and still is, a conversation. We did fine with it for now, and it is what it is, but I see, it's kind of like you have to research it and see how it can have advantages. I don't think we've seen too many of our partners doing much with that yet, but I also think, sort of in the same vein of some of the layoffs, some of the changes that were made in the past year or so, I have wonder if, and I'm sure what Jay is saying makes sense, if it's like in the works, because some of our vendors, I am just getting knocked around and like, here's my new account rep. And literally in the last week, I feel like I've been 3 emails from vendors with like a new account rep. So maybe it's now the next step. They're gonna like, hey, let's have a meeting and that be introduced. It definitely sounds good, because I agree with what Jay says, is that it has always been, Microsoft's always had some level of rebates if you're a level partner. But for the most part, most partners, it's just kind of like, maybe if they see you at a conference, they'll buy a beer or something of that nature. And that's great and all, but yeah, it's nice to put back towards the bottom line, or be able to use that. And even some vendors want you to do their training. That's fine. If it helps me get to some level and it helps my techs be better, that's great. So I'm open to, it can be a two-way street, but it sounds great. I can't say I've seen it yet, but I welcome it. I really do.
Jay, any reply? Last word.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a light switch. Microsoft is still reeling on subreddits and the 1,000 other watering holes, including, ChannelPro and a bunch of others, from bringing out the new commerce experience and then the point system and then shifting all the risk, over to Matt and his company. And then, I mean, they did 5 things in a row. Like they thought like the perfect storm, like shock and awe would be the right thing to do. And they've had to delay or postpone or indefinitely, like most of these things have just gone sideways. And most of their executive team have been on an apology tour for the last 12 months. It cost them a channel chief after only a few months. And the new one basically is on an apology tour. So other vendors are kind of learning maybe not to do shock and awe. And again, right down to your local channel account manager, getting everybody in lockstep and ready for these questions is going to take years. But again, getting to this early and getting into these conversations early are going to benefit you versus your competition, who maybe are just going to wait to see how everything settles.
That's a great strategy. Cover up a bad thing with 4 other bad things, and
that's it.
They got recipe for success, I guess.
Why spend 5 years and make 5 troubling announcements when you can just take a hammer and just hit them all at once?
Ripping off a Band-Aid, right? Just pull fast and be done. Yeah,
rip off an entire limb.
Yeah, totally. Right. Totally. Well, I mean, unfortunately, we are out of time. We could go on with this forever. There's so much to talk about. There's many macro trends happening right now. So much in the channel. But Jay, thank you so much for coming on and for talking with us about it. For those who want to learn more about these kinds of trends that you see, where you put your writings, where can they go? How can they find you?
You can find me anywhere. I track, LinkedIn message me or Twitter, message me, or whichever platform you happen to be on. I'm probably there too. And I don't go to sleep with any red circles on my iPhone. So I have a 0 inbox. So there's pretty well everywhere I can get back to you.
Fantastic. Well, that's going to be it for this particular segment. Big thanks to Jay McBain for coming on. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, Matt Rose will be joining us on the other side. We'll break down the show. We'll have a little bit of fun. What's going to happen? You never know. Anything could happen. That's why you got to stick around. We will be right back. And we are now back with part 3 of this episode. Matt Rose is still here with us. Really great interview with Jay McBain. I mean, Jay, I don't know what it is, but like when Jay talks, there's like a silence that comes over and everyone is just glued to everything he says. I don't know if it's just the way he talks, or you just realize that he really does have this amazing high level view of everything and is piece it all together and is just got super insightful things to say. But I always love having him on. It's always great. Matt, let me get your take. Any highlights from that interview? Anything that he said that you thought was super interesting?
I think it all was, and I think it just makes me realize just how smart he is and how much data he knows. And I think the data is interesting to hear with how many MSPs and how many, all this, like he throws those numbers out. And again, as much as we know where the economy is right now, it makes you feel better if you're an MSP, and at least, or gives you a somewhat of a thought process of where you need to go. So, I mean, I just overall think it was very informative, and yeah, I could probably listen to him for hours, even though it's just like nerdy number stuff, but hey, that's cool. I'm good with that.
It is cool. I was actually shocked at like how many of the smaller MSPs really seem to be struggling. I thought that number was way higher than what I thought it would be. In terms of being, at least being profitable enough to break even. I didn't realize there were that many MSPs losing money, which is kind of interesting. Rich, what kind of takeaways do you have from that?
And just FYI on that last point, Matt, at the ConnectWise IT Nation Connect event last November, the service leadership, which was Paul Dippel's company, ConnectWise owns it now. They published some data that said exactly the same thing, basically, that the bot, they have sort of an operational maturity scale that they use to measure people, and that bottom quartile is losing money, generally speaking, and the top quartile is kind of crushing it, and it all comes down to these different forms of operational maturity, which we can't get into. That, the thing I was kind of thinking about a little bit is you go back 3-4 years ago, and Jay even mentioned that term shadow channels, that idea that there are all these other companies selling technology services into your clients now, telco, printer copier, the accounting company is, selling ERP software. And there was this idea a few years back that over time, those companies are all going to realize that it's not that hard to manage the network and the devices too. And they'll all sort of start offering that on top of what they're offering now. And so there was this countervailing thought that, well, if you want to be able to compete with these shadow channels, you've got to start doing what they do, printers, copiers, telco, whatever. And it was just interesting hearing Jay talk about the way the model works today, which thankfully is not about everybody trying to eat everyone else's lunch. Basically, it's people are kind of staying in their lane a little bit and learning to work together to partner and form this ecosystem to support the customer, and that strikes me as a much better model for everyone involved.
Yep,
I agree. There's if you try to do it all, it's so hard. There's just so much to do. I don't see how anybody could be effective, barring you be a massive MSP. I don't see how you could offer or support everything in that the typical SMB or business out there would need. Matt, I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's just impossible. Yeah, there's like different partners selling different things, but yeah, you as an MSP, you might know somebody, or you might want to have that connection, like Jay was talking about, into somebody doing, I don't know, Salesforce work or whatever, because it helps you and you can have a better relationship, or maybe make something on an implementation part. But there's no way you can have the staff on hand. You're right, unless you're huge. But one of the big five accounting firms probably might be able to do it. That's probably about it. And even then, can they do it well? All of it?
Well, that's the question too. I mean, it's almost better to stay, like Rich said, stay in your lane and get really good at what you do, as opposed to try and do everything all at once. I guess that kind of makes sense. So yeah, cool interview. Big thanks to Jay for coming on. He's always welcome back. Love to hear his thoughts on things all the time. But we are going to move on, and we are at the point of the show where we try to have a little fun with our guest host. We have a new guest host. His first appearance here. He's done a marvelous job. A round of applause, everyone, for Mr. Matt Rose. But we're going to play our classic signature game that we get to play with our new guests, and that is the game of 5 questions. So for new listeners or new viewers who don't know how this works, Rich and I will pepper Matt Rose with 5 different questions, which we'll go back and forth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The deal is that Rich and I are not allowed to write the questions in advance. We have to make them up on the fly. I guarantee they will be ridiculous, and well, at least my questions are usually ridiculous. But we'll talk about stuff. It's just stuff to get to know you a little bit better and see what you think on certain things. So Rich, ease him into it. Question number 1.
So you were in New York.
Yes.
You are in Florida. So I don't know where your sports allegiances lie. Who is your football team?
Unfortunately, the Jets.
A long-suffering Jets fan.
Yeah, it's not fun, but yeah, I got my allegiance to him. Losing built character. I think my father told me that my whole life. So I have a lot of character.
Some people really just like self-torture, I guess.
No.
Self-punishment.
No, I don't.
All right. So question number 2. When I'll stay on that vein. What was the hardest thing to adjust to from moving from New York to Florida?
I think the hardest thing for me was actually that most of my family, it still lives in New York, and I've been very close to my mom and dad and cousins, things like that. So that was the hardest thing, but it was probably tough for the first year or 2 until we started having a family, and then it kind of but it's worked out well. My family comes down a lot to visit, but that was probably the hardest part. It was, even when I was living in New York City and working, I was at most an hour and a half drive away from seeing them and whatever. So that was probably the hardest thing to adjust from.
All right, Rich, question number 3 to you.
So a lot of great things about New York, and New York City specifically, Manhattan. One of them is all of the great sidewalk cart snacks that you can get there. So what is your favorite kind of snack to get from a street cart vendor in New York?
That's a tough one. I'm probably going to go with some chicken shawarma. And what's funny is we went to the Build It conference. I think we met there briefly, Rich, in 2021, not last year. Well, yeah, not last year, the year before. And they did a street cart thing on the one night, and they had a cart for it, and it was like, ooh, So I think I'll go with that as my number 1.
All right. You live in Orlando. This is question number 4. You live in Orlando now. Have for a while. I have to ask this one. You have kids, right?
I do.
Okay. Do you go to Disney World?
Not really. We're just far enough out in the suburbs, if you will, whatever you want to call suburbs, from the Disney area. So we do not we go to Disney World maybe once or twice a year.
Okay, but you're there. You're
Yeah.
fairly regularly, much more than the average person who lives outside of Florida
Yeah.
or Orlando. Okay, so at Disney World, what is your 3 least favorite rides that, like, if your kids want to go on them and you're like, oh God, I don't want to do this one, and you can't say It's a Small World because that's cheating. Go.
Oh, I could tell you a funny Small World story. My dad would kill me if you ever watch this, but I'll tell you, I'll save that in case you want it later. But so I didn't realize this until I was there this past Halloween. Space Mountain. I realized I'm too old for that. It just, my kid was screaming the whole time, loving it. I was like, no. Tower of Terror, probably second. I'm having trouble with the third one because those two just. Oh, there was. Oh, but I don't remember the name of it is, but there's one in Epcot that's kind of like a. You're on these like race cars. It's in the it just goes really fast. I don't know what it was. I don't remember the name of it, but I also didn't like that one. Again, I'm getting to that point where, like, the crazy loop-de-loops or the super fast rides are killing me. So.
Wow, it's funny. If this was reversed, like, those are like 3 of my favorite things.
It's not that I physically want to, but my brain and my vertigo says no.
I love the Tower of Terror. That's one of my. I have a T-shirt from Tower of Terror.
Oh, there you go.
And the drop thing is actually not all. It's fun, but it's all the setup that they have for that ride is just super cool and fun. And I do know the racetrack one. It does launch you pretty quick when you go out the gate there too. Rich, are you a Disney? I have a question for B in a second too. Rich, are you a big Disney fan? Do you like go and ride stuff when you're out there?
I've honestly never been to Disney World. I grew up partly in Southern California, so I've been to Disneyland a ton of times, but I've actually never been to Disney World.
Interesting. I mean, I'm sure you've been there for like events, right? Like, but you just never went into the park.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, interesting. So what's your least liked Disneyland ride? They have a lot of the same stuff, I think.
Yeah, I don't know, the teacups. There are, let's face it, there are some, whatever B ticket items. They probably don't do that anymore. That are kind of lame, but yeah.
Okay, question 4B. You have to tell me the story about It's a Small World and your dad.
So when I was a kid living in New York, my dad and I, he had an uncle who lived in Florida, and we had to do the drive the car thing down in the winter and drive it back in the spring. So I would go with him. He would take me out of school and everything. I would do my schoolwork. And so we're down there. I was probably like 6, I don't know, 5 or 6. And we're at Disney, and we had just gone on like Space Mountain and everything just to give him some credit. And then we went into Small World. And, this silly little boat. And we come out of the ride, and I had a bag that had the autograph book in it. And he's like, give me the bag, give me the bag, give it. And I'm like, what? And I threw up right outside the ride. It's a Small World. And, so we joke with them all over time. Like when we first went with the kids years ago, like I took a video and It's a Small World and sent it to him like, hey, making you feel sick. And realistically, it's the joke of everything. But it really was partially that we went to, my dad was frugal growing up. I say that instead of cheap. We went to one of those timeshare things in the morning where they give you a total buffet where you can eat. And for some reason, I just didn't want to eat. My dad's just chowing. So God knows if the food was bad. And then we went on the rides, and then just It's a Small World. He's not good with boats. So just even a little boat ride. So my dad like threw up completely on It's a Small World.
Well, it's a ride that makes a lot of people sick. So,
but in the family, it's our favorite thing. We're going to Disney. It's a small,
Usually it's not a physical sick. Usually it's a mental illness that you get from that ride. But but yeah, I hear it's a really cool story. All right, Rich. Question number 5 to you.
So you may or may not have one actually, but you are yourself now a Florida man, Matt. Do you have a favorite Florida man story?
I mean, it's funny, Jay was joking before we got on the air about like the whole like bath salts thing. And I think that whole bath salt thing years ago, and I think it was South Florida, it was just the craziest one. But there was a thing that I forget what it was, but there was like a whole thing people are doing years ago is if you look up like your birthday in Florida man on Google, there's articles, and it's just it'll be an article from your birthday. And it was kind of, so if you ever want some fun, go on Google and type in your birthday and Florida man, and you'll get an article like every day of the year, or sometimes multiples of them. So, but I think the one that was just that whole bath salt thing was just crazy to me.
I don't know if I must have missed that story. So what was with the bath salts?
It was just basically like people getting high on bath salts. Like who, it's just like who even thinks, and it was basically a Florida man that decided on it. And it's like, who thought to eat that? I mean, I guess it's right up there with whoever decided to eat Tide Pods.
Right.
Like it's right in the same mental level, I guess. But so, but it was like they, I think he tried to eat his neighbor or something. Like it was just some really, like they were super high on something that you should never eat. Then again, but like try to eat his neighbor and just really weird stuff.
I will have to go research or read that article.
You might get put on a list when you Google that, but have fun with it.
Well, I'm probably one of many at this point, so no worries. Well, amazing stuff. Thanks for playing along. That was 5 questions. Good stuff. But we're not going to say goodbye quite yet, because Rich, you're going to tell us what we might have missed and what might be coming down the pike.
Well, in terms of what you might have missed, you're going to need to wait a week until our next In Case You Missed It column comes, written by our own James Gaskin. This is an off week for James, but coming up next week, the first ASCII event of 2023 in Newport Beach, California, and the Q1 meeting of IT Nation Evolve, their peer groups. So those are, and then obviously there's going to be some tech news next week as well, but you'll have to tune into the show to find out what that is.
Yes, we will. Yes, you shall. Of course, we'll talk about that in a second. But first, I want to say big thanks to Matt Rose, Director of Technology Services, Tech Rage IT. Thanks for so much coming on. I hope you had fun.
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Very cool.
Can I jump in and plug something for him, or at least thank him? Because you're right, Matt. We met at the Build It Live conference in Jersey City 2021, and shortly after that, you got in touch with me, asked me for my address, and then you sent me a copy of your book. And I'm holding it up for people who are watching the video. It's called "Kiss Tech Rage Goodbye: 8 Tech Myths Debunked to Keep You Sane" by Matt Rose. This is for end users, right? This is a marketing tool.
Yep, it's been great. I mean, it's on Amazon and stuff. And funny enough, like we had some people buy it where we were on the #1 for a day or two after it went, which was not expected. But literally, like I've given it to clients. There's some stories from clients that I've taken their names to protect the units, protect their stories. And I bring it on sales calls with me now. And instead of me droning on about something, they can just read a story. So it's just kind of short story thing, all from actual things that happened or were told to me. And it's just been a really nice marketing tool.
That sounds interesting. Well, we'll put a link to the book at Amazon on the show notes page, so folks can go and check that out. And for those who, so if you're interested in his book, you can go and check that. But for anyone else who wants to get in touch with you, learn more about you, connect with you, partner with you, where can they go? How can they find you?
So, I mean, I think the easiest thing is if you look on LinkedIn, weirdly enough, there's a lot of Matt Roses, but if you look up Matt Rose in Orlando, Florida might be the only one. There's like some guy in Texas, weirdly enough, in cybersecurity. Connect with me there. I'm happy to chat with anybody. I do like to go to at least a few conferences a year. I'm going to Write a Boom next year. I go to IT Nation. I'll go to the ChannelPro when it's in the area. I got to see. I have to check where it is, to be honest. But LinkedIn's probably the best way to get me, and happy to chat with anybody and talk about where we've been and where we're going.
Very cool. Well, thanks again for coming on, and hopefully we will see you on the show sometime down the road. With that, we're going to wrap up episode 256. But of course, where should you also go each and every day to get the latest information, news, articles, white papers, resources, all kinds of stuff to help make your business better? That's channelpronetwork.com. Set it as your homepage and make sure that you go there each and every day. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, I really encourage you to do so anywhere podcasts are found. So whatever your favorite podcast platform is, make sure you subscribe so you know when we've got new episodes coming out for you, and you can keep us in your pocket, because I've always wanted to be in somebody's pocket. I don't know why that sounds like it might be cozy and warm. I'm not sure, but subscribe everywhere where you can. If you do like to watch, it's a long show. I know most people probably don't watch, but if you do like to watch, we're on YouTube. You can subscribe there, hit the bell, hit the notifications button, hit the thumbs up, hit like I said, they got a lot of buttons. Hit them all and take us with you each and every day. If you have any comments, we'd love to hear your feedback, questions, send them to us, podcast@channelpronetwork.com. Love to hear those. And of course, follow us on the social networks. Make sure you get on one of our events for this year and come and see us in person. We're going to be all over the country, a lot on the East Coast, some on the West Coast. We're just in Dallas, but we're going to be a lot more places. So join us those. We also have some virtual events. Make sure, in fact, we had one of those yesterday, believe it or not. It was our sister brand, our Fine Biometrics event, but a really cool event and content. If you're interested in biometrics, you should check those out too. We've got 3 more virtual events. Our next one, I believe, is our Cybersecurity Summit. Rich, stop me if I'm wrong. That's coming up in April, if I remember correctly.
Our next virtual event is in April, correct?
Yeah, that's, I believe, our Cybersecurity Summit. So make
Yes.
sure that you check us out. And that one, it's unlimited capacity. You don't have to fly anywhere, and it's easy to attend and get to. Make sure you use our promo code. I put it on the graphic earlier, but you'll need promo code CP Weekly, sorry, for anything that you sign up for, and that way we can see you there. So with that, we're going to say goodbye here in episode 206. We'll see everyone next week. Who's going to be on, Rich?
Our guest host will be Henry Tim, an MSP from the Midwest. He's been on the cover of our magazine recently. And our interview guest, how do you possibly follow up on Jay McBain? Our interview guest next week is Janet Shines.
Wow, that's going to be a big one. And
yeah,
there's a story behind that one, and it'll be an interesting one to tell. Maybe we'll tell it or not, but I'm very excited to get Janet Shine on the show. That is going to be fantastic. Nobody wants to miss next week. Make sure you subscribe. See everybody next week. Take care.